Welcome to Human Rights Asia Weekly Roundup. I'm Jessica Fernando. In this week's special program, AHRC TV marks the International Day of the Disappeared, which falls on the 30th of August. Enforced disappearances are a huge problem in a number of Asian countries, including Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and the Philippines. Government security forces routinely imprison people illegally under undisclosed circumstances or simply kill and dispose of the bodies of disfavored critics of the government. AHRC TV will bring you reports from each of these countries in today's special program. In Sri Lanka, no justice for tens of thousands of disappeared persons. In Pakistan, we speak to Basir Naveed about the recent spate of enforced disappearances. In the Philippines, ex-General Palparan has finally been arrested for abductions committed in 2006. AHRC TV also speaks with Basil Fernando on the lack of justice for the disappeared across Asia. Madhushka is the father of two young children. On the 2nd of September 2013, he disappeared. His young wife has been going to the police station and visiting police authorities, begging them to find her husband. She has also personally handed over a letter to the President of Sri Lanka, telling him about the disappearance and requesting his intervention. However, nobody is doing anything to look for her husband. Madhushka disappeared after he was arrested by the police. One of his friends, who was arrested with him, has confirmed this. A few months after his disappearance, unidentified people visited Madhushka's wife and threatened her, telling her not to look for her husband. They claimed that if she creates trouble, she and her children will also disappear.
මදුෂ්කගේ බිරිඳගේ ගෙදරට ඇවිල්ලා නන්දාඳුන දෙන්නෙක් ඇවිල්ලා මෝටර් බයික් එකකින් ඇවිල්ලා කියලා ගිහලා තියෙනවා මදුෂ්ක ගැන හොයන්න එපා විශේෂයෙන් මදුෂ්ක ගැන හෙව්වොතින් මදුෂ්කට වෙච්ච දේ තමයි මේ දරුවන්ට සහ යාටත් වෙන්නේ කියලා.
Madhushka's wife's story is identical to the experiences of thousands of other women whose loved ones have been disappeared. Recently, the largest numbers of disappearances in Sri Lanka have been from the north and east of the country. Many times, the relatives have come to the streets to demonstrate before high-profile personalities, such as the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, to demand a search for their loved ones. While recent disappearances number in the thousands, in the last few decades, tens of thousands of people from all over the country have disappeared. A commission inquiring into enforced disappearances has stated that a disappearance in Sri Lanka means an abduction in place of arrest, followed by interrogations, followed by killing and the disposal of bodies. All subsequent governments, including the present government, refuse to take any serious action on these enforced disappearances, as investigation would expose military and police officers. Because of this, it is not possible to expect serious investigations. The international community has also failed to generate a credible solution to this problem. Under these circumstances, Madhushka's wife, and thousands of others like her, continue to suffer without hope of finding their loved ones or indeed finding justice on their behalf. The government of Pakistan has so far failed to legislate against enforced disappearances, despite promises to a visiting delegation of the UN Working Group on Involuntary and Enforced Disappearance in 2012. With us in the studio now, we have Basir Naveed, a senior researcher for South Asia at the Asian Human Rights Commission. Welcome, Basir.
Thank you.
Could you tell us more about the recent spate of disappearances in Pakistan?
Actually, the disappearances, that process was very rare in Pakistan. And after 9/11, when the world was involved in war against terrorism, so at that time there was a military government in Pakistan. So military government took advantage of this war against terrorists, and they, rather than attacking on the Taliban or Al-Qaeda, the Islamic militants, they started attacking those nationalist groups and those secular groups which were demanding for the more provincial autonomy or autonomy on their resources. So the first victim was that Balochistan, which has nothing to do with the Afghanistan or the Islamic militancy. And this was continued from 2001 still it is continued, even though there are civilian governments, because that civilian governments do not have control on the military, and military thinks that this is their way of dealing with the people and civilians should not interfere into it.
What are the estimated numbers of people who have disappeared in Pakistan in recent times, and where is it most prevalent?
Balochistan, generally the nationalist groups are claiming that 18,000 people are disappeared. But what the actual conservative estimation is that around 8,000 people are disappeared since 2001. And in Sindh, that province, 200 nationalists have been disappeared or extrajudicially killed. And the same is that 2000 from that province KPK, we call it, which is bordering the Afghanistan, and where that Islamic militancy is there. So, and from Punjab, some 100 people. So, these are the figures, but as the government do not keep any statistics, or they don't want to show the people that how much are disappeared, so we cannot have exact figure of the disappearances.
Are the alleged perpetrators ever tried in court?
No, never, because that many times that Supreme Court has initiated and asked the civilian government or asked the police to arrest. But the Supreme Court has also indicted those military officers that they are the responsible for disappearances, and the Supreme Court found the evidences that they are responsible. But police cannot arrest them, nor the government, because the military is not allowing that persons should be arrested. And now, when finding these rulings from the higher courts, so government has come out with a new ordinance. Now it has become the law, that Pakistan Protection Act it calls, through which the disappearances have become the legal. Government has made this law retrospective, so it will affect all the previous one, and the agencies who are involved in disappearing, they got the impunity. And through this Pakistan Protection Ordinance, the law enforcement authorities have been authorized to shoot at sight or keep person for 90 days, and cannot tell any institution that where is the person. So these things have actually legalized the disappearances, extrajudicial killings and torture. This is the big issue for which civil society is struggling.
Some positive steps have been taken in the fight against disappearances in the Philippines. In early August, Jovito Palparan Jr., a retired military general wanted on charges of kidnapping and illegal detention, was arrested by the National Bureau of Investigation in Santa Mesa, Metro Manila. Palparan is the primary suspect in the abduction, illegal detention, torture, and rape of Sherlyn Cadapan and Karen Empeño. Cadapan and Empeño were senior undergraduate students at the University of the Philippines when they were abducted by armed men in Hagonoy, Bulacan, in June 2006. The abductors were alleged to be soldiers attached to units under Palparan's command. On the 4th of July 2006, when interviewed on television, Palparan admitted his men took custody of Cadapan and Empeño and two others who were released. Cadapan and Empeño were not released, and their whereabouts remain unknown to this day. Palparan claimed they were members of the New People's Army collecting revolutionary taxes. However, when Cadapan and Empeño's family filed petition for habeas corpus with the Supreme Court, Palparan denied having custody of the victims and denied having knowledge of their abduction. The impact of Palparan's recent arrest has been significant in the Philippines. Until recently, it would have been unthinkable that a powerful military general could be held accountable for human rights abuses. For more on this story, we spoke with Cristina Palabay, Secretary General of the Karapatan Alliance for the Advancement of People's Rights.
The act of enforced disappearance as a means to silence critics of the government, of the existing status, of the status quo, is a very prevalent one. It dates back former President Ferdinand Marcos, and that's when it all started. Karapatan and the families of the disappeared have documented 1,871 victims of enforced disappearances since the time of President Ferdinand Marcos up to the current administration. It is ironic that while the world celebrates the assumption of President Corazon Aquino into power in 1986, enforced disappearances continue to be committed by state security forces, especially against against social activists, to legitimize a regime by silencing its critics through the act of enforced disappearances. So this act of enforced disappearances has a deeply rooted culture. It breeds on the culture of fascism, breeds on the culture of impunity that persists up to this day. Based on our documentation on reports of human rights abuses, we think that the situation is in fact getting worse. Because while military generals like General Palparan are being arrested, which is largely due to the persistence of the victims and their relatives, there are many more military generals who were involved in the said crime who are now promoted by the current administration, empowered more than ever to conduct the same crimes on the ground. At the same time, this arrest of a military general, of a high-ranking military general in the Philippines is, we think, the first of its kind, a significant victory. Not one military general has been arrested before the arrest of the general occurred in the past many years that there have been cases of enforced disappearances. We think this is a victory of the Filipino people. As we all know, in the human rights community in the Asia-Pacific region, we are still a long way to go, from achieving justice, from ending impunity in our communities, from the village level to the regional level. But this arrest says that anything is possible, especially when people's actions and unity is achieved in struggling for justice.
For an overview on the issue of enforced disappearances in Asia, we spoke with Basil Fernando, the Director of Policy and Programs at the Asian Human Rights Commission.
The power over life in any civilized society is given in a very restrictive way. That is, only a judge is allowed to make a pronouncement of a death, and that is after the entire due process is followed. Now, what you have in disappearances is that this power is given to anybody. It can be a military person, it can be a policeman, it can be a criminal or anybody. It gets distributed 1,000 times to thousands of people. In situations where there is large-scale disappearances, thousands of people are given the power to decide on the life of somebody. Now that is a tremendous crisis of a civilization. So what we see in number of our countries today is a very fundamental crisis of civilization, where the power is given to all kinds of people to decide on life of people. And that is why later it is so difficult to find out what happens or to punish people, because you have given a power that should never be given, except in a very restrictive way to a large scale distribution. It is this problem that is not being adequately discussed when we are discussing about disappearances. It is not just some other crime. It is the worst thing that we can do in a civilization. We are removing the restriction of who should exercise power over life. And when that is done, nobody can be safe and no value can remain in society. This is the highest value. Life is the highest value. Therefore, there is a highest restriction of the use of death sentence. Now, giving the death sentence to all kinds of people, that is what is happening in terms of disappearances. So, it's a civilizational crisis. It's a very fundamental problem, and I think this should be more squarely, faced both at the United Nations level as well as various countries. Magnitude of this problem, the enormous crisis it creates on civilization, enormous loss of faith that will come as a result of that in society, where nothing can be determinate. So that is the kind of problem we are faced with in terms of disappearances.
That is all for this week's Human Rights Asia Weekly Roundup. For more information, log on to www.humanrights.asia. Thank you for watching and see you next week.